Okay, we're live again. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Quit List. We appreciate you being here. Before we get going, what we want you to do is share that video with the people in your life, the people in your circles and your networks. Believe me, they're going to thank you for it. I'm going to give you 3 seconds to do that. So go ahead and share now in 3, 2. This is the Quit List. I'm Dr. Stan. This is the show where we hit it and quit it. I'm called the Quit Doctor. Today on the show, I'm joined by my guest, attorney Gavin Jackson. Attorney Jackson, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. Always great to be with you, Dr. Stan.
We're also joined by our guest, Dr. Garrard. This is the show where we hit it and quit it. Okay, we got some feedback. Then we've got some feedback or something going on. Okay, Dr. Anila, can you hear me now? Dr. Anila, sounds like, can you, Dr. McClendon, can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Okay, so we're also joined on the show by our guest, Dr. Garrard McClendon, PhD. Dr. Garrard McClendon is, in fact, a social scientist and college professor at Chicago State University. Dr. McClendon, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Love it.
We're also joined by Dr. Anila Court. Now, I've got a feeling that Dr. Anila is having some technical difficulties. I tell you what, I'm going to ask my good producer, Raj, drop Dr. Anila out, fix her up, and bring her back in. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead. Issue number one on the Quit List, Chadwick Boseman. Chadwick Boseman was one of the most significant and respected actors of his time. In his short career, he played historical figures such as James Brown, Jackie Robinson, and Thurgood Marshall. He died from colon cancer, but he kept his condition private, and he continued to pursue his acting career even as he received treatment. Chadwick Boseman was most famous, of course, for his role as Black Panther, which won numerous awards, and it was one of the highest grossing films of all time. That film was recognized for its cultural significance. Chadwick Boseman brought this regal presence to the role of King T'Challa of the fictional nation of what is it called?
Wakanda.
Wakanda, yeah. I'm going to say Rwanda. That's a real place. But Wakanda, the fictional nation of Wakanda, which is in Africa. Now, he brought a presence to that role that is very hard to imagine anyone else playing that character. So the question, I want to go to you, Dr. McClendon, on this. What do you think it is that makes Chadwick Boseman such a special person?
Chadwick Boseman was extremely humble as an actor in these times, and we don't see that much humility. Now, don't get me wrong, to be a politician or to be an actor, especially a film star, it takes a certain degree of confidence. Sometimes it can blend into arrogance, but Chadwick Boseman had this uncanny way of saying, look, I'm just the guy next door who plays superheroes. I'm just the guy next door who plays baseball players from the Negro leagues to the national baseball leagues. I'm just that guy who can play Thurgood. I'm just that guy. And so the beauty of Chadwick Boseman is that, one, the humility aspect, and two, the work ethic. It's almost as if he knew he was going to die. So he said, look, my time is limited, so I'm going to get my filmography catalog as robust as possible because I'm not going to be on planet Earth that long. I mean, the fact that he played T'Challa is just remarkable. And to play a role like that has so much significance for Black people on the planet is just remarkable.
Well, I do want to talk about why that particular movie had so much significance, but I want to go to Gavin Jackson. Gavin, just very quickly, could you tell us, what do you think about Chadwick? Why is it? What do you think that made Chadwick Boseman such a great actor? I'm sure you saw that film maybe even multiple times with your two sons.
Yes. So yeah, as Stanley knows, so I have two school-age sons. My sons are 9 and 12, and so to have these two up and coming future Black men be able to see a character that is the smartest person in the film, that is the most noble person in the film, that is the strongest person in the film, and is a Black person, having that impressed upon their conscious and subconscious mind is more important than I think I can even understand right now, even though I know how important it is. I also just want to make sure that we honor the intention of the actor Chadwick Boseman. I heard him in an interview once say that even as a young up and coming actor, that he would pass on all of these roles that his agent would bring to him that could further his career, but he thought would be a poor representation of a Black person. So he actually sacrificed some possible fame, some possible money, and he risked his career to make sure that he always waited on roles that he could be proud of. You have to honor that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's amazing. We are joined now again by Dr. Anila Ricks-Cord. We glad you're back with us. Dr. Anila, I want to find out from you from a woman's perspective. Now, Chadwick Boseman, he played these superhero characters and he did it extremely well, better than anybody we've seen for the most part. Does women view these types of roles, the superhero, Black Panther type roles, differently, do you think, than men? In other words, had you ever watched superhero movies prior to Black Panther?
Yes, I have. I'm a Marvel fan, actually a Marvel junkie. I think the thing that was awesome about this particular role, as I agree with my colleagues, Chadwick Boseman chose iconic roles long before he ever became the physical embodiment of the first Black superhero for us. And I think that there have been others, but I think the thing that was awesome about this that had international ripples is that this narrative that we don't have a history, we don't have a culture, we don't have a language, and then there's no greatness associated with anything we did, to have someone who was African, that had African-American ties, and you brought it all together, it made people go to the movie theaters in outfits that they custom made and bought, going and repping and going multiple times. It was everything. And then you think about how we're perceived in theory, particularly at this point in time in the world, with how there's this shift in how Black people are being seen. I would dare to say that he was the catalyst for this paradigm flip in how you see Black people, what they're worth, what they're capable of. So yes, Black Panther is on constant repeat. We actually gonna watch it again on Friday with my 11-year-old. Yes, because yes.
Well, I think you just said something very special. There is this concept of Afrofuturism, and that concept deals with how Black people are seen in the future. If you watch science fiction movies, if you watch any of these types of fantasy movies, normally you're going to see them led by white mainstream characters, and you don't see Black people playing those roles. So I think one of the things that made Chadwick Boseman, and in particular Black Panther, so special is the fact that in relation to this concept, we actually saw a Black person who was the king. He was the leader of his own nation. Everybody around him was positive. I mean, it was just such a great thing. I do want to just, Dr. Anila, I do want to ask you about this just very quickly too. The idea, something that Dr. McClendon said a minute ago, that he worked as if he knew that his time was limited. And I think that is true. I did see an interview with him where he knew that he had it about 4 years earlier, but he did not reveal that, and he continued to push through with those roles. Now, just from a medical perspective, how does that play in terms of Black men and colon cancer? Is it true that Black men are more susceptible to colon cancer, for example?
It is absolutely true. And so when you listen to his story, you find that Chadwick Boseman was diagnosed at essentially age 39 with stage 3 and transitioned on to stage 4, which he eventually succumbed to. Yes, the American College of Surgeons, the American Society for Gastroenterology suggests actually that For standard in America, as a general rule, the thought process is you hit 50, you go get your roto-rooter with the camera up your hind part, your colonoscopy. Everybody should go get that. But in African Americans, what they're finding is because the rate of colon cancer occurs 20 times higher in us and it happens younger in us, that as a Black person, you should go get a colonoscopy at age 45. That there are certain syndromes that predispose you for getting colon cancer, definitively. But this Thanksgiving, what I want people to do, assuming that COVID makes it show you can actually go and gather at Thanksgiving. One of the things we don't do as African American families, at least for my time frame, is we don't sit and talk about who had what, who died from what, who succumbed to what. The trick is know your family history, because if you're at risk, the generalized screening of 50 does not apply to you. Case in point, not exactly related, but sort of. My grandma died not too long ago, 95, of colon cancer. 95, you can get whatever it is you want to, but that's something you should know. If there's somebody that has a history of colorectal cancer where they are diagnosed before 50, the screening parameters changes for you. And the problem with us as African Americans is when we're diagnosed at a later stage, which is essentially a death sentence. Like, you just know you got it and you ride it out till it takes you out, essentially. It's crucial.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Doc.
We can be scaredy cats in some areas, but, and then we can be fearless in some areas. But when it comes to Black men getting that colon checked, when it comes to Black men, and the latex glove, we don't like that. But as a cancer survivor myself, I know how important that is. Also, I just got my 23andMe DNA results back. And it's so interesting. It's beyond who's related to you. When you get your DNA tested and you look at all of the haplogroups involved, you'll see what you're prone to have, what your ancestors had, and what your future descendants may get. And so passing that information on, like the good doctor just said, is so important. And I think, that's the beauty of a Chadwick Boseman. He got checked. He worked as hard as he could with treatment, and he worked as hard as he could being an actor. And he got this great body of work out, even though the man was ill.
Yeah, this guy was amazing. Attorney Jackson, I noticed that LaTanya just made a comment. She said, yes, you should know your history. And I think that is very important, that we do know what's happening throughout our family bloodline, because that could, help us in terms of our own health situation. Attorney Jackson, I want to ask you a quick question here. In terms of the movie Black Panther, now Chadwick Boseman has passed on. Do you think that in the next movie, and there will be a next movie, do you believe that they will, T'Challa will either die or go away and someone else will assume the mantle of Black Panther, or do you think they will replace T'Challa with another actor? What do you think?
No, I actually think that they will have to wait to replace the character King T'Challa with another actor, unless they wait 10 years to do another movie. He embodies the character so much that we could not see another actor in it. For a while, when Christopher Reeves brought the Superman character up to a certain level, it took a decade before someone else could play Superman, because society as a whole had accepted Christopher Reeves as Superman. I believe we have done the same. He has earned the same honor as King T'Challa. It is his character, and it would have to be a great deal of time to pass before someone else could play that. I just want to add just 30 seconds. One more important thing that I think he has added with this character is the power of the Black dollar. That movie was actually at the time the highest grossest movie in the Avengers Marvel canon, and it was because Black people came out to support that movie, which showed movie studios that Black-based films can be highly profitable. I think that's equally as important as well.
Well, I think you're right about that, but that's why they're not going to wait 10 years to do.
No, you're right.
That's not going to happen, Dr. Neal.
No.
And remember, in Black Panther, here's the beauty of Black Panther, the character. It was written so eloquently that if you realize that the heart-shaped herb is the item that basically determines who the Black Panther is. Of course, you have to be blessed to be able to partake of the heart-shaped herb. But the beauty is, even though a Chadwick Boseman is gone, there will be a
another.
Black
Anyone
Panther.
can embody the Black Panther.
Absolutely.
And expressing geekiness here in the cartoon, Shuri became the next Black Panther. So why not?
I believe they will do that. I believe it'll be a Black woman. I think you're right, Doc.
That may be the compromise for his sister Shuri to actually become the next Black Panther, because originally his father was Black Panther. His father died, then he became Black Panther. So it may just be a natural progression that after him, his sister becomes the next Black Panther. That would make a lot of sense. It's time for us to hit it or quit it. The question is, now, is any movie just escapism, or can the movie be more than that for Black people? So hit it means yes, quit it no. The question is, did the Black Panther change anything for Black people? In other words, once again, is it just 2 hours of escapism, or is there a much more cultural relevance to the movie? Hit it or quit it. Dr. McClendon.
Yes, hit it. Cultural relevance, sociological, psychological, mental relevance. Even though you may escape for 2.5 hours to see a film, it resides in the consciousness and subconsciousness forever. And so Black Panther does this on multiple levels for Black people, because not only did it do it in the fiction world, it also brought it in the nonfiction world, in our daily lives, walking as kings and queens. Hit it.
Dr. Anila, hit it or quit it. Hit it says yes, quit it no. And the question, of course, is whether the movie is more culturally relevant than just escapism.
Hit it for sure. It can be both. We could escape on a regular one on iTunes playlist over and over again as you choose to. And how many people would move to Wakanda if there was a state that was actually formed in Africa called such a thing? How many people after the last election were trying to move to Wakanda? Yes.
Attorney Jackson, hit it or quit it.
I agree with both doctors. Hit it. It had a mass effect on the collective consciousness of the nation. And I also want to add that movies like that affect the consciousness of young white people. It's important for white people to also be able to see Black people as leaders and royalty as well.
Okay, issue number 2 on the quit list, Pastor John Gray's infidelity. John Gray is the senior pastor of a church in Greenville, South Carolina. He's also the associate pastor at Joel Osteen's church in Houston, Texas. John Gray allegedly had an affair. Now, his legal team said that there was no physical affair. Get that? No physical affair. But that he was, in fact, a victim of extortion and blackmail. There's a writer for the Griot, Shauna Pinnock. She said that she found John Gray to be an abhorrent example of a man of God. He told the other woman who he allegedly had this affair with that he planned to leave his wife, he did not love his wife, and he only married his wife because she looked good on paper. Dr. Anila, is Pinnock right? Does John Gray put Christians in a bad light?
Well, I'm glad that I get to be first pick up. Yay. So this is twofold. I will tell you, I had a different perspective this morning before I talked to my sister, who's a first lady of a church. And so she gave me a whole different perspective. The thought process is this: just like in medicine, the running doctrine is primum non nocere, first do no harm. The concern with him being in the position of power and authority that he's in is that if he's not careful, he can twist and flip stuff. People can't extort you if you didn't do anything to be extorted. If it was not such a big deal, and we know that several years ago he had an issue with a woman who he obviously was physically intimate with, and now supposedly I was just emotionally intimate with this lady. Be it physical or intimate, you still gave something to somebody else that belonged to your wife. So that's at issue. I think that unfortunately, while I've listened to him both when he was with Osteen and I've listened to a couple of his sermons beforehand, he can bring the word. The way he presents the word is awesome. But the concern is it you misrepresented the power and authority that you were given, and you used it for some other way in a bad way. Like you've now used, and you think about the fact that pastors sometimes are in the position of being able to counsel. If this is what you do, or this is what's underneath it, how are you abusing the authority that you're given in order to be able to influence folks the way you have? The underlying question is, what kind of accountability does Mr. Gray have? Because you have, obviously, if you're a Christian man and you're a pastor, you got some accountability to God. But the trick is that the point my sister was making is outside of his own circle, where I'm sure there are people that tell him yes about everything else. Does he have someone outside of his own circle who can come to him and say, John, you shouldn't be talking to her on the phone. John, you should be taking text messages from someone else. Because underneath, even though this is an issue between he and his wife, although you can't live big and show everybody what you got going on, and then in the moment that you get into trouble, retreat and say that's personal, underneath there's something going on with him that causes him to continue to cheat, be it physical, emotional, spiritual, whatever. But yes, he does a disservice to Christianity, because unfortunately, because you have taken this position where obviously to whom much is given, much is required, you are held at a higher standard. And so the things that happened with Joe Blow Smuckatello and his wife, that they had infidelity and that's between them and that's a private matter, because you live so publicly, because you can influence so many people, while it is a public matter, it's also a private matter, because God gave you power and authority to be able to take care of his flock, and you done made it so you trying to get girlfriends on the side. It's all wrong.
Okay, Attorney Jackson, what do you think? The idea that he did, now we don't know if he did or not, but assume that we know he did something. The fact that he apologized, is that good enough? In other words, and this is not specific to John Gray, I'm talking about church leaders in general, pastors of churches. If a person does something that we might consider, quote, a sin, and then that person apologizes, is that okay?
Well, it's okay if it's okay for his congregation. We have to realize that, like, he cannot be like a dark stain on all of Christianity or all of religion, because he only represents what is happening in his flock. And every individual church, every individual faith community has its own standards. There are some communities where their faith allows them to have multiple wives. There are some communities where if your spouse was of the same sex of you, that would be acceptable, but then another faith community would find that to be abhorrent. So every community has its own standard. I agree that he has a special, in business, we call it duty of care, duty of loyalty. He has a duty of care and of loyalty to the standards of his community, particularly because in religion and in any nonprofit, it is the community that actually supports the institution. If his community accepts the apology, I think that's all that matters. If his community rejects it, then that's also all that matters.
Dr. McClendon, what do you think about that?
You know, I've always said that I have problems with people who borrow Jesus's words and then sell them during the Sunday sermon. That's problematic to me. I also have problems when people profess the word of Jesus Christ, but they're saying, do as I say, not as I do. When you're the pastor of a church, everybody's listening to every word you say, and they're looking at everything you do. And so when it comes to infidelity, I don't care if it's mental, psychological, if it's emotional, if it's physical. Cheating is cheating. You have to be totally dedicated to your spouse. You have to be totally dedicated to your church. And when you start flamming and texting people and let me get with you after church, my wife's, see, that's problematic to me. Of course he can be forgiven. That's between him, his wife, and his God. But when it comes to being a role model for people in a leadership position, you got to check yourself. You really have to check yourself, or else just go be a motivational speaker and have infidelity as much as you want. When you're the pastor of a church, get yourself together. It's low self-esteem problems. I've seen this ever since he was at Lakewood in Texas. You could tell that John Gray has very low self-esteem, and if he gets any attention from another female, he starts to feel himself again. And so that's problematic. He got to get with God. He got to start praying, and he has to tighten that bond with his wife, or else just split up and go elsewhere.
I
So
agree with
Dr.
all that
Anila,
and go do the work.
yeah, sounds like you're agreeing with that. What about
Yeah.
the idea that the devil had something to do with it? The devil made him do it. Now,
Whatever. I
I'm not
hate
saying that.
that.
Is
I'm
that
not
was
saying
that his
that.
excuse? Was that what he said?
Well, he said a lot. He spoke for an hour, apologizing.
Okay.
But one of the things was that, the devil, right? Like if you're a Christian, you believe in the devil, and there is this notion that the devil is evil, and there are evil influences that do cause people to behave in certain ways. Dr. Anila, what about that?
So basically what you're saying is that the John Gray said that the lady was a succubus and that's what made him do it. Okay, all right, gotcha. When I was 6, I came home once and wrote on the wall, and my grandma, who was a devout Christian, who converted from Catholicism, I told her the devil made me do it. She beat my hind parts and said the devil will never make you do another thing ever again. So maybe John missed out on that one when he was a little boy. But no, I disagree. I think that even Jesus was tempted. The trick is, as the lovely Dr. McClendon said, he's got some issues with insecurity. Your gift will make room for you and get you in the door, but what worked for you to get you in the door can't keep you. You got to recognize what your isms and schisms are and work on them. The lovely Mr. Gray needs to go work on his insecurity so that no matter who comes up, stroking on your head, talking about how good you look in your suit, that it doesn't deviate your course from what God intended for you to do and who he hooked you up with in order to be able to make it work out. Otherwise, if you don't address that, it's going to be, I don't know, what other forms of cheating are there other than physical and emotional, like electronic, technical, what? I don't know. Until he addresses that, it's going to be an issue that continues to recur for him over and over and over again.
Yeah, just quickly, this is how a man checks himself, all right? You check yourself by saying, would my wife approve of the behavior or the words or the qualities that I'm exuding around other people? That's how you check yourself. And he hasn't checked himself in a long time.
Does that mean that he's not a good husband? Attorney Jackson, what do you think about that?
Well, in the confines of the knowledge and understanding of marriage as I understand it, yes, that's a very poor husband. But just getting to how we criticize the church and the institution because of his behavior, sometimes people will try to deny themselves and conform themselves based on standards that they shouldn't even conform to. Remember, we had all these rampant, and I mean rampant is an accurate word, allegations of sexual abuse and child abuse in the Catholic Church. And some people try to say, well, you have all of these years where you are saying priests must be celibate. You can have no relationship. And this is the expression in some ways of you trying to put people in a box that they should not have accepted. They're not built to be in a celibate life, which you would have to be as a Catholic priest. Maybe he has tried to put himself in a box where he does not belong because the way he wants to live does not comport with the standards of that institution.
What are you saying that?
I'm saying if he
maybe
wants to be free and have a bunch of women, he just has to not be in an institution where that's not allowed. You have to figure out another way to live that life. There are ways. He can go into show business. I think Garrard said he could be a motivational speaker. Find something else to do to where you're not hurting and betraying the people around you, and you can still live your life.
Do you think that being a pastor and being single and have multiple girlfriends, does that work?
I'm sure there's some church somewhere where that works. Not the Southern Baptist tradition church that he belongs to, but I'm sure there is some place where he could start a church and say, this is a single man's church. I'm a single man. This is what I do. And this is my understanding of spirituality. And, his flock will hear his voice, even if it's only 20 people.
And there's always Jerry Falwell Jr.
Exactly.
I was wondering if you were going to touch that.
Exactly. Get a pool boy.
Too.
All right. Well, we're out of time on this particular episode of the Quit List. So we need to know, should we hit it or quit it? And here's the question. The question is, should church leaders, and I'm talking about senior ministers, pastors of a church, should church leaders be held to a higher standard than other church members? Dr. McClendon, hit it or quit it. Hit it is yes, quit it is no.
Hit it, yes. They should be held to a higher standard.
Dr. Anila.
Yes, hit it. Yes. Otherwise, you're just a church member. If it's devil may care where you can do whatever it is you want to do, why are you in a position of leadership? The people who are in a position of leadership are called to a higher standard. They have a skill set that the average Joe doesn't have. Yes.
Dr. Attorney Jackson.
The one non-doctor. Yes, hit it. The people trust you. The people that put their trust in you. You have to hold yourself to a higher standard.
All right, there you have it, folks. This has been the episode of The Quit List. I've been joined by my guest, Dr. Garrard McClendon. We appreciate you being here. Dr. Anila, we appreciate you. And Attorney Gavin Jackson. Dr. Anila actually is a doctor of, tell us what it is, OB-GYN.
Yes, I'm an obstetrician gynecologist in El Paso, Texas.
All right, very good. All right, we appreciate you guys being here. Thank you. This has been another episode of I say the Ink Spot. I gotta quit saying the Ink Spot because that was my other show. That's an amazing show. Go on YouTube, take a look at it. All these guys have been on that show. They love it. I love it. It's just wonderful. But this show is The Quit List. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see you right back here next time on The Quit List.
Camped out at home for COVID? Join us, Indie TV, where you will see the talk shows, movies, drama, action, and comedy. Be the first and see it first. Sign up now for free at Indie TV.